Right, welcome to International Full Soap Timeline, Hangout 61. Epstein's willing whores. Unlike other previous timeline hangouts, I won't be discussing anything else except around the subject of this case to illustrate, to make points. On December 29th, Ghislaine Maxwell was convicted on 5 or 6 counts involving child sex trafficking. This woman is looking at a very heavy sentence. Now, before we go any further, to avoid the inevitable misrepresentations, twisting my words, etc., before I discuss this case, let me make my position clear. Do I believe Jeffrey Epstein did things with underage girls he shouldn't have? Most definitely. Did he deserve to serve hard time? Most definitely. Did Ghislaine Maxwell deserve to be convicted? Probably. Does she deserve to spend the rest of her life behind bars? Absolutely not. Jeffrey Epstein is widely referred to as a paedophile. As Lady Colin Campbell points out, he wasn't a paedophile. A paedophile implies interest in prepubescent girls, mostly boys actually, because a lot of paedophiles are homosexual or have an interest in boys. But and then you have NAMBLA, the North American Man-Boy Love Association. But basically, Epstein wasn't a paedophile. He, as far as the reliable evidence is concerned, he was interested in slightly younger girls from about 14, which again is a no-no. But there's so much rubbish written about this case and spouted about it, about these victims, some of whom were not actually victims, some of whom were unindicted co-conspirators. There's been so much rubbish spouted about it, and there's so much hysteria over child sexual abuse that it's difficult to talk about it without people getting literally hysterical over it. So let me make that point clear. Some of these victims, so-called, in particular Virginia Roberts, the Virginia Giuffre, the former Virginia Roberts, and Sarah Ransome, were not victims, right? They were unindicted co-conspirators. Roberts has zero credibility, and Ransome, I would say even less, but her little girl lost Frightened Little Woman Act doesn't do any doesn't cut any ice with me, and it shouldn't cut any ice with you either. Right, let's talk about child sex trafficking. Should distinguish that from sex trafficking and from human trafficking. The child element makes it a lot more serious. Some of these victims, 2 of them, so-called victims, were prostitutes, Roberts and Ransome. No doubt about that whatsoever. And there's another woman, at least one other woman, who was a prostitute, or prostituted herself. As far as trafficking and prostitution is concerned, there are 4 narratives of prostitution. I've written about this. You'll find it on my main website. Traditionally, a prostitute was a fallen woman, the biblical harlot, or the Victorian unfortunate. She could also be seen as a good time girl, but basically she was a fallen woman, even if she didn't realise it. With the advent of second wave feminism, the women's liberation, as it was misnamed, came up with the idea of prostitution as rape. In fact, some of these idiots even claimed that pornography was the equivalent of rape. That's without mentioning homosexual pornography. Prostitutes got organised and started to fight back, and they came up with a slogan sex work equals real work, or simply sex work equals work. By the time social media arrived, this was a real thing, because now most pornography, by whatever definition, is online. It's films, photographs, etc. And a lot of it is only, well, a lot of it I wouldn't consider pornographic at all. For example, there are women, Amazons, female wrestlers, who part of their livelihood includes having sessions, one-on-one sessions with men in hotel rooms, wrestling them, and usually they beat them for some reason. There's all sorts of other stuff which is, I find it difficult. It doesn't involve sex, doesn't involve nudity or total nudity. There's women dressing up as superheroines and stuff, and there's also some quite depraved stuff which has nothing to do with sex. Scat, I didn't qualify that. I didn't say any more about that. And torture stuff. So, a lot of it homosexual related. But the slogan "sex work is work" is valid. So to combat that, as it were, third wave feminism, in an unholy alliance with Christian moralists, the usual anti-porn suspects, they come up with the idea of trafficking. So a woman isn't a prostitute. She's well, Catherine McKinnon, that odious second wave feminist, said that prostitutes were prostituted women, prostituted people. They didn't prostitute themselves; they were bought and sold by men. The evil patriarchy. In the United States, prostitution is, apart from Nevada, it's illegal in theory, and women can be arrested for prostitution. Men can be arrested for soliciting prostitutes, using prostitutes, and they've come up with this trafficking nonsense. So that basically, if a man pulls up his car in a red light district, a prostitute walks over to the window, they have a conversation to the car window. She gets in the car, he drives around the corner, she performs a sex act on him. He drives back, they go their separate ways. She's been trafficked. You have the Mann Act, which goes back a long way, which concerned transportation of underage females. But the whole concept is garbage, total garbage, trafficked. I mean, so the sentences that can be handed down for trafficking in the United States are horrendous. Now, again, I don't want to be seen as apologising for anything Epstein did. These girls, slightly underage girls, were recruited to give him massages, which, I mean, massage isn't sex, but they call it sexualised, and he shouldn't have done it. Okay, no doubt about that. He shouldn't have done it. Some of them have claimed later that they were sexually assaulted or even actually raped. None of them made that claim at the time, up to his first arrest. None of them. And in fact, they were very well remunerated for their services. They were given $200, $300 a time. None of them complained at the time. None of them said it ruined their lives. It was only later, when money, lots of it, was on the table, that we heard this nonsense. Now, again, I don't want to sound apologetic for anything Epstein does. He isn't my type of person. Wasn't my type of person. But if you want to hear see what trafficking really means, You have to look at some of the grooming cases in Britain, the Rochdale cases and other, which I'll play you a clip, a short clip, and you can see how radically different they were, and the sentences handed down to these lowlifes who were at times, right, I mean, some girls they go through, maybe a dozen who will go through one in the same night. The sentences that were handed down to these lowlifes were, most people consider them insufficient, but were nothing like as much as Ghislaine Maxwell is going to get, or Epstein would have got had he lived and been convicted. In the United States, everything is out of proportion with this hysteria over so-called sex trafficking.
Two pairs of brothers were among 5 men jailed for life for their part in a paedophile sex grooming ring which abused children from Oxford. A total of 7 men were jailed after being convicted at the Old Bailey of abusing girls aged between 11 and 15, as Cordelia Lynch reports.
The faces behind a sadistic sex ring today sentenced to a minimum of 95 years in prison. Among them 2 sets of brothers, their victims finally free of the men who groomed them.
Tonight when the girls go home, they can go home in confidence, knowing that these men that have caused them so much pain are behind bars.
Their hunting ground was the Cowley Road area of Oxford. The men plied the girls with alcohol, cocaine and cannabis. They then beat, raped and tortured them. We've heard that many were in care, some as young as 11. But one of the girls identified this man, Anjem Dojar, as one of the abusers. He claimed it was a case of mistaken identity.
Like, as I said to you, I've got a big family. Everyone knows my family, like me and my brothers around the area, you know, around the Cali Red. Yeah. All the Asians know each other. Yeah. I don't know if this goes from the social services or whatever. Like.
His brother Akhtar was also part of the gang.
Were you involved in any sexual activities with any girl knowing they were under 13 years of age?
No comment.
So too was Mohammed Kara and his brother Bassam. All 4 men have been jailed for life. But it was 8 years before the group was caught. The police and social services missed critical warning signs. The director of the children's charity Bernardo's has warned what we have heard at the Old Bailey is chilling. A fundamental shift in the collective mindset is needed at every level of the justice system. It's hoped the bravery of the 6 victims in this case will comfort others, but the authorities know they have a lot more to do.
That was a news clip from June 2013. The reprobates convicted at the Central Criminal Court received heavier sentences than most in such cases. The girls were as young as 11. There's been no credible evidence that Epstein used girls as young as that. And they were beaten, tortured and raped like with force. Were any of Epstein's so-called victims tortured? No. This is the former Virginia Roberts in her own words.
And Giuffre described what happened next at a townhouse after the club.
It didn't last very long, the whole entire procedure. It was disgusting. He wasn't mean or anything, but he got up and he said thanks and walked out, and I sat there in bed just horrified and ashamed. It was a wicked time in my life. It was a really scary time in my life. I had just been abused by a member of the royal family.
I'd just been abused by a member of the royal family. Boo-hoo. And here she is admitting to dealing out abuse herself.
To me, still to this day, it is my biggest shame that I carry around that I will never get rid of. And I'm really, really sad that I brought other girls my age and even younger into a world that they should have never been introduced to.
Prince Andrew claims he can't remember ever meeting the then Virginia Roberts. That seems unlikely, and there is of course photographic evidence. There is though a very good reason, two good reasons actually might have done that. One is that he was ashamed of having sex with a prostitute, and he may not have realised she was a prostitute at the time. The other is, how can I put it? Gloria Allred, the corrupt American lawyer who initiated a witch hunt against Bill Cosby, and if you don't believe it was a witch hunt, check out my video, The Prior Bad Acts of Gloria Allred. When Cosby denied the allegations, these women sued him for defamation, obviously prompted by Allred. When Donald Trump denied raping the certifiable lunatic E. Jean Carroll, she sued him for defamation, and that defamation suit is ongoing. So it may have been that Andrew was afraid that if he called this little whore a liar, that she would sue him for defamation. Now she's suing him for something else. She won't get anywhere, hopefully not. Andrew has also been criticised for his continued association with Jeffrey Epstein after Epstein's conviction. Well, he actually showed loyalty to a friend, which royals are not supposed to do. So are we supposed to think ill of him for that? Mike Tyson is a convicted rapist, yet he's still a guest on numerous sports programs and the like as a pundit. There are plenty of people out there who've done horrible things in the past, far more horrible than Jeffrey Epstein, and they, well, people still associate with them, friends and family members. Is that so terrible? Here is Roberts again, talking in a somewhat longer clip. If what she says is true, the question is, how does she know this? How does she know about girls giving Jeffrey sexual services? She was clearly a co-conspirator. And from the other thing she says about having fun on the island, well, it's clear that she was, well, in her own words, that they were a family, albeit a dysfunctional one. She claims to have been trafficked to London by Epstein, but he sent her to Thailand on her own. What does that say? That she was a trusted confidant, more of a family member than an employee. So again, she was an unindicted co-conspirator, and if Ghislaine Maxwell has agency for her bad acts, so does Roberts, the former Virginia Roberts. Anyway, here's the clip.
It kind of worked like a pyramid scheme. Ghislaine brought me in. I brought other girls in. Those girls brought other girls in. And no matter what, Jeffrey constantly had that open revolving door of young women, young teenagers, children, I like to call them, coming through his door for one purpose and one purpose alone. And he didn't care what he had to do to get that reaction from them, to get them to have sex with him, or get them to, I mean, sometimes he would just jerk off in front of them and rub his nipples. Sometimes he would have intercourse with them. Sometimes he'd make them, you know, give him blowjobs. Ghislaine participated in these acts with him as well, you know, and that was just the never-ending cycle. That was every single day. So we were at the island by ourselves, Jeffrey and me and Ghislaine, and we had gone for a nice snorkeling event. I mean, in some ways, we were a little fucked up family. I mean, we would sit together and watch Sex and the City together, and we would go hiking. We would make things together. I mean, we collected all this pirate treasure, like just broken glass bottles, and we make a table from it. Like, we did weird family stuff. All right, so it just wasn't all about that, but that was how this worked, the inner goings of it. You know, it was, all right, you need to have sex at least, you know, Jeffrey needs to have sex at least 7 times a day and have this happen at least, you know, this many times a day. But in the meantime, you know, we're going to sit back and have some popcorn while you're giving you a blowjob and watching Sex in the City. Like, it was just really screwed up, kind of a little family unit for a while.
There appears to be a consensus that when Andrew sat down for that interview with Emily Maitlis, it was a disaster. He was certainly unprepared, but he did get some hardball questions, which I thought he answered fairly reasonably. Has anybody asked Virginia Roberts, Virginia Giuffre, any hardball questions? Seriously? Or Sarah Ransome? No. I keep stressing this, but these women have zero credibility. Roberts needs to be, well, she needs to be disbelieved. But look at the evidence. This is a woman who was having, at the age of 17, was having the time of her life, flying all over the world with and sometimes without Jeffrey Epstein, drinking champagne. She had lots of money to burn, as other sources point out. She was exposed by the Daily Mail, and then the same paper comes back and promotes her. This woman is utterly contemptible, and women like her, frankly, they do a disservice to genuine victims of abuse. One more subject of agency. Virginia Giuffre makes the point that she was under the age of consent when she was doing these things, so she shouldn't be held accountable. The 2 girls in this photograph were 12 years old when they committed a truly horrible crime. You can look up the Slender Man case yourself. Suffice it to say that they were tried as adults and given very heavy sentences. The victim survived miraculously, literally miraculously. If 12-year-olds can be held accountable for their acts of an act like they did, then Virginia Roberts can be held accountable for what she did when she was 16, 17, 18. On the subject of grooming, one of Britain's most notorious serial killers was groomed from the age of 15 by her future husband. She became even more notorious than him. Look up the case of Rosemary West if you're not familiar with it already. Does the fact that she was groomed by a depraved individual absolve her of agency on the murder she committed? Of course not. If Virginia Roberts lacks credibility, so does Sarah Ransome. She was well over the age of consent when she met Jeffrey Epstein, yet she still plays the victim. On December the 18th, The Columbian published an article by Froma Harrop, which made some incisive comments about Ransome. Filthy Rich, a documentary about Epstein, spends a good amount of time with Sarah Ransome. She was young, but in her early 20s when she flew to Epstein's private island on his private plane. There, she claimed he raped her several times. But when they go back to New York, Ransome moved into an apartment owned by Epstein, and the sex continued. "I still believe he would help me get to fashion school," she said. And he was giving her money, and she has a book to sell. What do you do with this? The documentary neglected to mention that Ransome had previously worked as an exotic dancer and escort. On camera, she played the ingenue, saying in a sing-song that when she arrived in New York, "I didn't know anyone, and I didn't have any money," she cried unconvincingly. Ransome has also made outrageous and false claims against Bill Clinton and Hillary Clinton, to name but two. Ransome also claimed that Epstein threatened to kill her if she ever told anyone. This is a well-worn tactic of faux victims. This guy is David Rhodes. I actually knew him. He was a professional criminal. He was given a 10-year sentence in 1997, but was paroled early. In 2001, he was shot dead. As I say, he was a member of the criminal element. I like the guy. He was a he was a real character. Members of the criminal element do things like that, but people who move in circles of Epstein and especially the Clintons, they don't do that. Donald Trump knows what they do. They use fake dossiers and smear campaigns and fake prosecutions. So, did Epstein threaten Ransome? No, I don't think so. She was in it for the money. They were all in it for the money. Again, that doesn't mean he didn't do things he shouldn't be. He shouldn't be messing around with 14-year-old girls. One of his accusers said that he wanted her to wear a schoolgirl outfit. Maxwell arranged for this. He could have paid midgets to dress up as schoolgirls, but no. Now, did he do damage to these young women? How much damage did he do to them? Well, certainly they made a lot of money out of him. Money which a lot of them spent unwisely. One other thing I should say is that there's been a lot of conspiratorial stuff around this. Names have been mentioned. Donald Trump, of course. Any time they can smear Trump, they will. Bill Gates, yada yada yada. Is this really so sinister? No. Well, Epstein was incredibly wealthy. How he obtained that wealth remains to be seen. Certainly Mr. Wexler had something to do with it. He probably duped Wexler, the same as a lot of other con men, especially Jewish con men, have duped other people. The one who springs to mind most readily is of course Bernie Madoff. He ripped off Jews as well as Gentiles. These people are totally without scruple. So I don't believe any of this garbage about Wexler. The reality is that these people live in, I mean, how many billionaires are there in the United States? They tend to know each other. The reason I think that the trial put on so few so-called victims is because of their credibility. Alan Dershowitz has commented on this. Robert Scaffrey has absolutely no credibility. Ransome has no credibility. These women are liars and they're parasites. Let's be quite frank about that. I mean, Guthrie did well for herself after she found her Captain Save-A-Ho husband, and she's now a mother of 3. If she had stayed out of the limelight, stayed in the Australian outback, I don't think any reasonable person would have criticised her, but she's decided she wants a bigger slice of the pie, and she may end up with egg on her face, to mix metaphors. Hopefully she will. So, yes, I mean, Epstein was a sexual predator, but he wasn't in the same league as these grooming gangs. I say take a good look at these grooming gangs that operated in the north of England and not so north of England. What these victims suffered was truly outrageous, shocking. They weren't living on desert islands, jetting all over the place. Weren't like Victoria. They weren't like Virginia Roberts, drinking champagne in an exclusive West End nightclub, then shagging a prince. So anyway, this is about all I have to say. Check out the video I made on sex trafficking. There is a lot of absolute garbage about this. Yes, it is undesirable. Of course, it is. It's criminal. Prostitution is undesirable. Not all prostitutes think so. Certainly not all patrons of them think so. But this whole thing has been blown up out of all proportion. I don't believe there was any great conspiracy here. I don't believe that Epstein was used by intelligence or Mossad, or no more than any other powerful businessman could be. The whole thing is a sad affair, particularly sad for Ghislaine Maxwell now, as she's facing spending the rest of her life in prison. But don't fall for all this crap about victims. There are genuine victims out there, and as I've said many times before, real victims, real rape victims, real sexual abuse victims have bruises, not credibility issues.